Good afternoon, everyone. We're midway through Philippine Startup Week, and we're excited to bring you another event that will hopefully help more startup founders get their businesses set up the right way. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eunice Braga, and I'm the External Relations Manager for Ideaspace. And we're so glad to be hosting this event for you this afternoon. Our event is entitled First Things First, Making Business Integrity a Priority. This is a joint event by UNDP and Ideaspace. This afternoon, we'll talk about how young entrepreneurs can make a significant impact by operating with honesty, transparency, and integrity, and how they can set an example for other entrepreneurs, not just within their own ecosystems, but also entrepreneurs in other countries. One of the ways that they can operate or start to operate with business integrity is to learn from the examples and experiences of others. UNDP's Fair Biz program is a wonderful opportunity and avenue for founders to learn from other founders, to learn from the experiences of entrepreneurs in other countries, and for private sector organizations to share their own knowledge and expertise with founders and with each other. So I'll be introducing our panel for this afternoon. Let's start with our moderator. Our moderator for this panel is Diane Eustaquio, the Executive Director of Ideaspace, an accelerator for tech startups. Ideaspace is an 8-year-old nonprofit organization that drives the development of Filipino entrepreneurs and Philippine-based startups. It runs founder-focused capacity-building programs and has been supported by some of the Philippines' top corporations since 2012. Diane assumed the role of executive director when First Pacific launched Ideaspace and has had a hand in supporting each of the 91 startups that are part of the Ideaspace community. In 2019, Ideaspace startups contributed an estimated amount of USD 7 million to the Philippine economy and close to 500 jobs in the startup ecosystem. In 2020, despite the effects of the pandemic, this number is projected to increase as it is the time to shine for tech startups. For Diane, Ideaspace does not invest in startups, it invests in people. So, we'd also like to introduce the three gentlemen forming our panel for this afternoon. The first one is Edmund Yap, who is the co-founder of Small Potato in Malaysia. Edmund is an education advocate, a community advocate, and business coach. In his previous life, he was an engineer, a salesman, a soft skills trainer, an educator, and a serial social entrepreneur. He also created edunation.my that is today continuing to help 160 Malaysian students a month. With 6,000 videos, Edunation, now known as Backflix, has become Asia's largest free educational resource. Today at Pew Pew, he helps purpose-driven businesses to grow in an effort to help more sorry, one last. Today at Pew Pew, he helps purpose-driven businesses to grow in an effort to help more entrepreneurs make the world a better place. While coaching other purpose-driven businesses, he's also building smallpotato.com, a neighbor help neighbor platform designed to help keep money circulating within communities. Our second panelist is Zulfikar Isa, who is the co-founder of Techscape Private Limited. Zulfikar is a technopreneur, a youth activist, and an exchange alumnus of Slippery Rock University from Hunza, a village in northern Pakistan, also known as the Roof of the World, which is the home to the world's second largest mountain peak, also known as K2. He is a senior pursuing a BS in computer science from ComSats in Islamabad, Pakistan. He is the founder and CEO of Pakistan's first edtech startup, which is Techscape. He has been serving his community for more than 7 years now in different capacities and has introduced basic digital skills to more than 5,000 kids belonging from very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds in his community. He has represented this country on many national and international platforms in countries such as Russia, the United States, and Jordan. He also co-founded another startup, Shirijon, to compete in the 10th annual Halt Prize and was among the regional finalists who competed in Amman, Jordan. His work recently got featured on Telenor Pakistan, the biggest telecommunications network in his country. Zulfikar aims to create an impact in his community by arranging tech camps and boot camps in those parts of his country where basics of digital skills, block programming, and basics of robotics are introduced in the underprivileged areas where there's still little to no internet connection available. Lastly, to round out our panel, we have Mr. Brooke Horowitz, who is a business integrity advisor for UNDP. Brooke serves on the United Nations Development Programme's Fair Biz project. He's also the CEO of Culture of Business Limited, which focuses on international trade and business consultancy, leadership, sales and marketing, and management training for SMEs, as well as market research. He has conducted studies on the global construction industry, creative industries, and public procurement. He is currently developing new services for companies wanting to increase their trade and investment with emerging markets. He is also the CEO of IBLF Global, a not for profit NGO, whose mission is to promote responsible business practices in emerging markets and, through collective action, combat corruption, thereby contributing to sustainable economic and social development. Since co founding the organization in 2013, he has co chaired the B20 Anti Corruption Task Force on behalf of the successive presidencies of Russia, Australia, and Turkey. Brooke has also authored two toolkits: an anti corruption toolkit for SMEs, commissioned by the G20, and an anti corruption toolkit for UK government officials posted abroad, commissioned by the UK's Foreign Office. So let's all welcome our panel for this afternoon: Diane, Brooke, Edmund, and Zulfikar.
Hi, Brooke. Hi,
Oh,
Edmund. And
Hi,
hi,
hey, hey, hey.
Zulfikar.
Hey,
hello,
Diane. Hey,
Yuval.
Blue.
How are you doing?
Yeah, hey, Zulika. First time.
How are things for you guys in Pakistan, Malaysia, and the UK?
Well, in Pakistan, things are pretty cold right now, and specifically, it's a bit humid. And since we are having elections here as well, so things are hyped up.
Oh,
How are things in Malaysia, Edmund?
well, it's a crazy year for everyone. Well, not just in Malaysia, everywhere in the world. We're all kind of on lockdown again, and so yeah, I mean, me and my wife, we got better at cooking because we had to do that every day. So yeah, crazy days, but there's always a silver lining in every dark cloud.
Thank you. And for you, Brooke, how are things
Yes,
in the
well,
UK?
we're in lockdown 2 in London and in the UK. And, well, need I say more? I mean, it's chaos. But on the other hand, I would have loved to be with you in the Philippines for this occasion. But I don't think it's going to happen, not this year and possibly not the beginning of next year, but maybe halfway through next year we'll have vaccines and we can look optimistically at the new normal, which is one of the part of our title of our event today.
Right. Okay. New normal, but I guess let's talk about the bedrock of organizations, and that is for me and for you, three gentlemen. I know you agreed that business integrity is a very important part of company. So maybe can we start first with Edmund and Zulfikar, whoever of you wants to start with. Why is business integrity important in building a company?
Wow, Zulfika, on to you.
Of course, why not? If you want me to. Well, see, integrity plays a very pivotal role in terms of development of even a person individually, right? And if you take this integrity in terms of business, it becomes a whole lot and a whole bigger responsibility than the word integrity itself. When you talk about business integrity, you talk about the cumulative trust that your consumers, that the people who actually trust in you, that in trust in you, right? So talking about business integrity in our ecosystem where I currently and my teammates are operating, uh, things are pretty different here. The dynamics are different, but the core values, the fundamentals, just like business integrity, they remains the same wherever you go. Be it United States, United Kingdom, be it any other country. All right. So for me as a person and the way I perceive business is it's more like it's a guiding principle, and it's one of the biggest the way we see here at Techscape that business integrity is one of the biggest ways to market yourself as well. People actually value you for the services that you provide, and if there is difference between what you say and what you provide, I don't think so. There, you might be having a lot of customers in that very ecosystem. All right. So over to you, Edmund. I guess that's that.
Okay. I think I want to talk about let's talk about the selfish part of this. Okay, so we talk about integrity being really good, right? Really, and integrity is really good for your soul. Yes. Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep at night. But I want to talk about something even more selfish, right? Because I came from two different worlds. The first world that I came from was the world of construction. And so I specialized in water treatment in the past, and we had a lot of different water treatment contracts. We built large-scale water treatment plants. And my gosh, the amount of corruption that's flying left, right, up, down is just absolutely ridiculous. Almost every single contract out there, it's someone's being paid off for the right to have that contract. And so much so that the entire industry, right, nobody bothers going for tenders anymore, right? They have a tender, nobody bothers with it. Why? Because everybody just knows that, hey, you're not going to look at my tender. You're just doing it as a formality. Someone else is going to get the contract. And so I came from that world, and I left because, well, I couldn't sleep at night. I became an entrepreneur. I went to education, and I did all these things. And when I became an entrepreneur, I realized that because of my years being spent in such a corrupted environment, I didn't learn any skills. I mean, I really didn't learn any skills. For example, the two most important things that we really have to do right as an entrepreneur is, number one, you got to be really good at sales and marketing, right? I mean, this is a real skill. It takes years to master. It takes years of experimentation. It takes years of really learning, especially if you're doing fast-moving consumer goods and all that, right? Years of learning, but I learned nothing of that sort. Why? Because contracts is like, oh, give me the contract, boom, I pay you money, right? And that was what my previous organization was. So when I started my own business, right, I couldn't sell. I struggled for 3 years. I started a training business back then. I struggled for 3 years, barely breaking even. In fact, I was minus 100,000, and I basically lost my investors' money from that. But so for 3 years, and that carried on for a long time after that, and I had to learn that from scratch. So talking about in a selfish perspective, if we start taking or giving bribes to start getting business, we don't have to learn that knowledge. And what happens is, when going gets tough, when the world changes, when people that we're bribing changes, then the business doesn't survive, because we don't have that fundamentals at all. So that's sales and marketing skills. The second is, I've seen it time and time again. In the construction site, I've seen very dangerous things happen, and the contractors involved were not apprehended. That's not the word. Not scolded. No, that's not the word either. Not fired. Okay. The contractors weren't fired simply because the head of the project manager in charge was actually in their pockets, right? So there was no consequences. Dangerous things happened. People could have died. Nothing happened, and we ended up with substandard quality treatment plants in Malaysia. So yeah, two things. You don't learn sales and marketing, and you never get to a point where your product is excellent enough to be able to sell in a public domain. Yeah.
And for Brooke, could you? I mean, you can, if it's possible, could you expound more on that selfish reason of entrepreneurs? There are other things like, I think, investments, or when you're looking for an investor, that's a selfish reason.
Yeah, well, quite. And I thank you to my two colleagues, Zulfikar and Ed, for those introductory comments. Yeah, they're spot on. On the selfish side, well, I think one has to ask, if you're an entrepreneur trying to attract funding, trying to sell your product, why would anybody invest in you if you had a reputation for doing the funny business? In other words, pocketing money, giving money to some government official. I mean, it becomes just a clear picture of the return on investment not really being maximized. But any investor who's serious about their investment will want it to be maximized. So I think on the selfish side, that is a really important thing. But we are talking about startups and young entrepreneurs, people who are the future of our business environment and our society. So I do want to talk about a little bit more of a broader picture and a motivation. Young people are going to be into setting up a business for probably the rest of their lives. I mean, nobody goes into setting all the trouble of setting up a new enterprise just for a few months. And I think that young people now are really conscious about all sorts of social and environmental aspects. There's a lot of discussion about climate change. There's a lot of discussion as a result of COVID of what our society looks like and the values of our society. And I think it is absolutely clear that you will not meet the climate change targets. You will not reduce pollution. You will not get rid of waste and plastic from the sea and all these other things that are destroying our futures and our health. You won't even get rid of COVID unless you have a more or less clean business environment, because corruption undermines everything. You will not reach environmental and social goals or the social development goals of the UN unless you've got corruption at least under control. Nobody's saying that it's going to be eliminated. We know that it's part of human nature, but it has to be brought under control. And I think that reason is also a selfish reason, because that is why everybody wants to live a normal life and why they want to do normal business.
Indeed, Brooke. If we don't achieve the SDGs, then we're all doomed, right?
I've seen this firsthand, actually, and I won't go into very specific details here, but we've seen it firsthand, right? So Malaysia had this education digitalization initiative. And this was years ago, way back ago. And I actually met one of the contractors that that worked in that project. And it's very strange because they said the Malaysian government spent billions and billions of ringgit to try to bring the internet into classrooms, to school classrooms, to bring devices so that kids can use them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's billions and billions of dollars wasted. Because what happened was the people who won the contracts, and this was told to me by one of the contractors, right? The people who won the contracts didn't actually care about education. In fact, most of them haven't done projects related to education at all. So it was I'm going to do it because there's money on the table, and I'm going to be given this project because I'm a corrupted person, right? And so what happened is billions and billions of ringgit years later is basically gone, lost. There was no progress in schools at all. And things got so bad because, in fact, teachers, students were actually forced to use the platform, even though it didn't benefit them, to pad up the numbers of, oh, this project is successful. So in fact, it wasn't just a very innocent thing where money is wasted. Okay, even that's not innocent. But it's very sinister because we waste children's time, we waste teachers' time, and all that goes towards students and schools underperforming, and really the kids grew up without the education that they deserve. So yeah, I've seen that firsthand, Brooke.
Yeah, and sorry if I may add, I think you had an example before of a health and safety situation. I mean, health and safety is completely undermined. What about all those buildings and schools that crumble when there's an earthquake, I mean, or a tornado or a hurricane, or the sort of things that you have in the Philippines, regrettably? I mean, if the construction has been undermined by poor quality materials, partly because money has been siphoned off at some stage in the procurement process, then it's inevitable that buildings will collapse. I mean, they're built as though they're supposed to be resistant to natural disasters, but they won't be resistant to natural disasters. That's a very, very clear and regrettably very frequent example of the effect of corruption.
Correct.
Zulfikar, you also were in EdTech before, and how did you encounter any situations where you were trying to introduce things and corruption was at your door?
Well, yeah. If I were to, start talking about them, I don't think so. 1 hour would be enough. And if you are talking about country like Pakistan, and then you are, suggesting me to, talk about an example. Yeah, there are a few. When at that very moment, I felt very heartbroken, and all that, disappointed in the system and all that, just because as Edmund said, that there were just people who had people on their back who actually had money on the table, and they actually wanted to grab the entire project and then dismantle the entire concept of that entire project as well. So yes, a similar incident happened with me and my co-founder and CEO. So we actually happened to went to meet with the education ministry in our country, right? So we just wanted to introduce, as Edmund said, I believe a version of that happened here in Pakistan as well, Edmund. I'm sorry for that. So it was initially an idea that we wanted to introduce the ed tech concept, or we wanted to introduce basic computer programming into the different curricula of schools, starting from grade 6 to grade 7, 8, 9, and so on and so forth. So we had this conversation, and here in third world countries, it's really difficult for you to get hold of a politician or someone who is a minister, and then actually set up a meeting with them. So your first struggle is setting up a meeting, and it takes you sometimes years. It actually happened with us that the person secretary of one of the minister replied after a year, and I replied him with a very big thank you, saying that thank you so very much that you replied me after a year. So there's something really common that entrepreneurs actually usually come across. So during that meeting with the Minister of Education, we actually gave him the concept of maybe we want give you one basic model of a digitally equipped class that will have the most digitally literate students. All right. And then on the top of that model, you can actually build and you can replicate it all across the country if you want to. Consequently, he disagreed that they're here in Pakistan. If you introduce these concepts to kids, what do you think? They will they'll fail their classes. They won't be able to go to their schools. They'll get attached to all those devices. He was actually worried about the backlashes of this entire project. So we somehow agreed that maybe he's right. Maybe we are not actually aware, or maybe we are not that much prepared for the technological boom that we actually want to endorse in the community that we are actually living in. To our surprise, after a couple of months, we actually saw that someone actually bid on that project, and that project was actually given to a construction contractor. Can you believe that? I mean, if you talk about integrity is dead there, right? So I mean, yeah, there are multiple incidents like these, but but we never, left this idea. We started on our own. We started targeting different with a different approach. We started, working with the private NGOs and organizations, and then from there, we are slowly and surely, actually building this, ecosystem day by day, step by step, baby steps.
Yeah, I have encountered those challenges too when, especially someone who isn't in the industry copies you. I've also seen situations where large companies ask startups to reveal everything, and then before you know it, the large company has built the same solution and is selling to, is doing better. Well, initially in terms of sales. Brooke, how how have you seen large companies, or is it in most parts of the world, who really leads the way in ensuring or espousing or evangelizing business integrity? Is it the large companies or is it the
Yeah, well, I mean,
smaller entrepreneurs?
I'm very sorry to hear about Zulfikar's example there, because it's very disappointing, and it's yeah, it kind of undermines your faith in humanity, really, and in government. It's a complete destruction of any basis of trust, and I'm so pleased that you took the right approach and decided to press on nevertheless, and and you're making progress even without, this government official who or the fellow who should have the government official who you mentioned, but that is and I think that it was, I'm sorry, you'll have to just tidy up my speech just there, editor. But I think that one of the very positive drivers of change is precisely the behavior that you showed. So, I mean, we don't want to be too moralistic about it or talk about religious values or beliefs or things like that, but your own conviction that you were right and that you would still be able to progress with your project no matter what. I think that kind of determination is something that, anyway, startup entrepreneurs must have in order to be successful. But you have to have this additional backbone of conviction that you do not want to do business in the way that has been suggested, and that you do want to do it in the right way for you and for the people that you work with and live with. So I think actually that story is the most important message. However, there are other supporting factors. I mean, one of them, one would hope, would be the law, but we know that most countries in the world have perfectly fine laws on paper, they're just not enforced. So this is a big issue on the public policy side, which my organization, UNDP, is very much focused on. And then I happen to think that the big global multinationals and the big companies, I mean, Diane, you talked about an example which was really the opposite of what I think should happen. It's, you make an approach to a big company, you reveal everything, and then it all the next thing you know, it gets stolen, and somebody else has taken your ideas. But actually, the big companies, the big global multinationals should not be doing that, and I think on the whole do not do that. And actually, they are, I believe, drivers for change. Now, it's not because they are particularly moralistic or virtuous. It's because they are under severe legal pressure in their own home territories to behave to the highest standards of integrity anywhere in the world where they operate. And their third-party contractors, the small and medium-sized enterprises that you all represent, that are part of those supply chains, also have to adhere to those standards. Otherwise, the big company gets taken to the cleaners by the federal and national authorities back at home. So, for their own self-defense, they are pretty keen to make sure that their employees anywhere in the world and the companies in their supply chains that are supplying them or distributing their products anywhere in the world are operating to these standards. To me, that is a pretty big driver of change. In fact, I could say that business here is an agent of social change.
That's great. And could you share with us a story or what company that pops into your head who's leading the way and getting other smaller organizations?
Well, I used to work for General Electric, which is, of course, used to be one of the biggest companies in the world. It's been overtaken by the new technology companies now. But in the 90s, I was working in Russia, which was still undergoing its transformation from the old Soviet Union, and it was really the Wild East, as they called it. And we started to introduce, in those very early days, a program called The Spirit and the Letter, which was a perfectly good compliance program. Of course, our clients tended to laugh in our face, and this is the usual first reaction of companies that are used to operating in a very corrupt environment. They don't believe it, and they don't even believe that you're trying to tell them about these things. And of course, it only really began to make sense to them when we started enforcing the rules that we'd established, which was to cut them off if we found out that they were doing something wrong. I think since those early days, there have been many, many companies that have taken up this battle. The legislation in the United States and in Europe has become a lot stricter. Companies are, very many of the US corruption cases, something like 89% of those cases over the last 10 or 20 years have been to do not with corruption by the big company, but by the small and medium-sized companies in the supply chain. And so that has changed the game. So I think that there are quite a few companies that are around the world that are very committed to this. The challenge is to get the big companies in the Philippines to play by those same rules with their supply chains and push that into the markets. It's also really critical. For example, in Malaysia, you've got a lot of state-owned enterprises or companies that are very closely related to the government, where the risks of corruption are legendary. And these are the kind of companies that are so influential in the region that actually need to play by the same rules as the best companies in the world.
Great. Edmund, could you react to that? And are there any companies that come to mind?
And so it's great that you're here, Brooke, because you talk about those high level government, what everyone up there is doing, and the big policy changes, and that's really
like it on the ground, right? That's what you're going to tell me.
I'm going to talk about the small potatoes, and small potato is another name in my vocabulary as a small entrepreneur, right? The person that's doing a small business. How do they hope that they can grow a business in an environment that's corrupted, that's just filled with corruption, and so what can small potatoes do? And so for this, right, I like to point to an organization that has been a real inspiration, I think, to many of us. There's this printing company in Malaysia that didn't start out big, but they grew big. It's called Thumbprints, right? No, Thumbprints. .com.my, right? And you'll notice that their entire brand is anti-corruption, right? That's their thing, right? They say that as a printing company, we will never take a single cent in bribes, and that is right in front there. It's told to everyone. And they give speeches about it all the time, and it's because this guy who started it, I can't remember his name. He gave a speech. He started it because he really wanted to sleep at night, right? And initially, what happened is when printing companies go into business to get large contracts, right? You had to, under the table kind of deals. But he said, no, I'm going to create a company that is totally anti-corruption.
He's back.
And yeah, nice to have you back, Zulfikar. Totally anti-corruption. And what happened was two things happened, right? One, a company that's like that, like Thumbprints, a company that's has right at the front that says, I'm anti-corruption. That is not what I'll do. Two things will happen. One, they'll attract the right kind of people to your business, right? It may not be everyone, obviously, right? But you attract the people who feel like you. And even if you have a business to appeal to the minority of those people, if they are the minority in your country, right? It's still a lot of business, right? You cater to the people who want to sleep at night. And even though they may not be many of them, but hey, even if you get 10 of these clients, for many small businesses, that's more than enough, right? So that's one, right? The right kind of people will look for you. Two, the wrong kind of people who want to look like they're doing the right thing will also look for you. So organizations who are, like, oh my God, we have a very bad, we're getting audited and whatnot, they would purposely look for you because they want to look like they're doing the right thing. So you attract two different kinds of people. And I think if you decide that you're not going to take part in this entire corruption environment, you could totally carve your own niche. You could have your own jungle space, right? Where your own tribe comes to look for you, and your own tribe comes to do business with you. And really, as a small business or even medium business, really, that's all you need to do. And by the time you get to a larger business, right, then you're talking about Brooks kind of level already, and you can actually really change an entire environment just by your purchasing power and your insistence that everyone.
But Ed, I mean, that's true. But I mean, I'm not saying necessarily. I mean, I was asked by Diane, what are the drivers of change, and I think one has to recognize that. It's going to still be very difficult for the small companies to behave in the ways that you say, unless something is happening on that macro level, right? But where they come together is that I think the small companies that get to a certain size and become eligible to be part of the supply chains of the bigger companies and perhaps the international multinationals should understand that there is going to be an increasing premium on their integrity. That will be part of the criterion for which they will be selected and for which they will win a competitive battle. But yes, if you're talking about a small company with its own market, I mean, it's admirable that you've found that that you've mentioned that example of a company that believes it and has attached their brand to the idea of integrity. And I think that's something that needs to be reproduced. And so the question is, and unfortunately, I believe that probably a lot of young entrepreneurs, people who have been brought up in very corrupt environments, will find this very difficult to believe, that there is a commercial benefit, there is a commercial opportunity by doing business in the right way. It's just that everything around them tells them the opposite. So that's why we've created a toolkit for young entrepreneurs, which actually goes into detail on all these issues and actually provides the arguments in favor of integrity as something that can actually help you get more business and make more profit.
Yes, Brooke, thanks for bringing up the toolkit. Zulfikar, have you encountered the toolkit that Brooke was talking about?
Well, yeah, I would say yes, multiple times. So, in order to navigate in the most corrupt areas, you need to develop your own toolkit by using human-centered design. This is what I would say, Brooke. Um, See, the situations that you might go through are not exactly the same that I'll be going through, right? Or Edmund will be going through, or anyone or any entrepreneur who aims to do business will go through. So you need to build your own seat, some basic principles, some ground rules for yourself. You need to set some ground rules for yourself to how you want to navigate your business. So the first thing in that would be, targeting or, finding your target audience, as Edmund said. All right. You need to find the people who you actually want to sell. Oh, and the next thing is, what do you want to sell them? All right. And the third thing is, how do you want to sell them? Is there anything that you want to sell them in a way that they should think of it as something else, and then they'll get, and then as a result, they'll get it as something really different? Is that what you want? I mean, customers' perspective is everything in terms of a young entrepreneur, as I see it. All right. So, so for as far as the toolkit is concerned, this can vary from place to place. If I were to talk about my own startup and the way we operate and the way we design our own toolkit, I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So it happened with us that there was this time we were actually operating in the capital. See, the capital is the place where of the country where you have all the facilities, be it internet, be it electricity, be it the transportation, the good education system, and each and everything. So there's the ideal use case where you can actually want to work, and there you can the buying power of your customers is really good as well. So I mean, you can pretty work there smoothly. But the areas where you want to, where we actually wanted to work, were the ones which were most neglected, where the bigger organizations, as you said, weren't allowing the small organizations to operate in those capacities which they should have operated. So what we actually did, we actually studied the dynamics of the entire area first. The first thing that came into our mind was, maybe if you do not want to work on the same level as they are, maybe you might want to work for a portion of that. I mean, a small partnership will work for you, right? So that's how you initiate. So what we started with a small partnership, with time ended up becoming a MOU, or a big partnership, or you can then after 2 or 3 years you can actually work with them in the same capacity as they do, and with time I believe that you can overpower that. So this is the toolkit that I think we have designed for ourselves by looking at our own dynamics, and I guess it applies for each and everyone. And partnership is among only one thing that I've mentioned. The second thing would be having multiple or different people or diverse skill set people around you, critically analyzing your entire progress would be something that I would say, in terms of integrity, that will matter a lot as well. So there's for the toolkit that I have to say.
Well, I love that idea of everybody having their own individual toolkit, but the idea of the UNDP toolkit was just to get people started. But of course, it's only as relevant as the broad terms in which it's construed. But I think that what you've just mentioned is quite right. The whole issue is the choice of your market, the choice of your products. I mean, if you really do not like this corruption business and you feel it's revolting and you don't want to participate in it, then your business probably shouldn't be selling oil and petroleum pipes to the government, right? I mean, because you'll just be engaging in a kind of business that you'll never be able to change, and you'll never be able to win with integrity, at least for the time being. So choose another market. I think also the idea of the partnership, who you're doing business with, who you're surrounding yourself by, these are all critical questions. I mean, it's not even a question about the corruption thing, is it? I mean, this is anybody who's becoming an entrepreneur and starting up their own business, we know this, has to surround themselves by like-minded people who will inspire them and play by their games. And it's exactly the same as in the area of business integrity. Some of the stuff that we've discussed, we haven't discussed now, is how do you detect corruption in your organization? How do you prevent it once you've set the organization up? You still have to be aware of those technicalities of what can you do about it? And if you are confronted by a corrupt situation, what are the options that you've got? Some big companies just have this, what I think is a banal answer, just say no. Well, that means don't do the business, which means your company might not survive. That's patently ridiculous for a young entrepreneur, for a startup entrepreneur. But there are quite a few ways of being able to negotiate your way out of a situation like that, which is, I think, experience worth sharing amongst entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Edmund or Zulfikar, have you ever experienced any of your people or anyone in your team who has breached the principles that you thought you hired them for, or that they supposedly abided by at the start? And if ever you encountered, what did you do to correct the situation?
Yes, I have encountered that. The challenge was it was my boss.
Okay.
But here's the thing, right? When I was an engineer, I was a fresh graduate, right? I was really, for lack of a better term, really quite blind to such things, right? And because if the environment is new and you have no other references to reflect on, then you think that things are normal, right? So I saw it with my boss, really. How they would take clients to really sleazy karaoke joints. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, what am I doing here? But so this is normal, is it? And I never had any reference point until until I guess until I grew up. So oh my gosh, yeah.
So there's a lot to do about conviction here, right? It's when you know you need to stand up and stand up for what is right. Where does the conviction come from? Is that really inborn? Is it coming from a community that supports you?
You know what's the funny thing? It wasn't anything like that. It was I mean, for me personally, right? Because I see all these things going on all the time. I slowly became unhappy And that's really strange, right? Because I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know why I was unhappy. I was just slowly sliding into consistent unhappiness. I guess you'd call that a mild depression, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't even know what it was. I just slowly became depressed. And I was like, what am I doing here? Why am I working so hard? I was having a midlife crisis in my 20s, right? Like, what am I, what? I mean, why am I working so hard? For what? And so only after a lot of very long-term, insidious suffering on the inside and a lot of reflection did I realize, oh my God, it's because of the life I'm living. It's because of all the corruption that's going on. It's because of all the people that's being impacted by this corruption. And I am part of that system. And that's when that light bulb finally came on after a lot of suffering. That's when I decided to go into education. Because I thought, okay, there's two ways I could fix this problem of corruption, right? It's either we do anti-corruption stuff, which is a very painful thing to do, or I go into education and I try to educate people out of that and give people the skills, the life skills, to be able to earn money in a way that it's sustainable and it's proper. So yeah, and so I took the path of education because I didn't think I had the cojones to go into anti-corruption.
Okay. All right.
Well, I just I admire that. I mean, I think everybody has to make these decisions at some point in their lives, and it's not an easy one. I mean, it's very easy for somebody in a comfortable corporate type job, or maybe making some kind of career, to just continue to progress in that career. I mean, one of the things that we discuss a lot in the kind of training that I give is, Diane's been on one of my programs, is the issue of ethical blindness, which is another form of corruption, if you like, but it's a kind of unconscious one. It's where people are turning a blind eye to things that they might think is not so important, but we know where ethical blindness can lead. It can lead to the explosions on oil rigs. It can lead to dreadful famines. There's no end of catastrophes for the company, but also for the society around the company, especially in developing countries. And this kind of ethical blindness can only be combated with this inner conviction, as Diane was saying, and some courage, which is what you showed when you moved from your previous career path to the one of education. And you can be happy in that. You know that you're doing what you love doing, and you can do it honestly as well, and you're helping a lot of people at the same time. So, I mean, that has to be the answer at some level. I mean, we can't expect everybody to take those kind of attitudes, but at some point, we all have to make these personal decisions. Zulfikar, you had a power outage, did you? You obviously weren't paying the facilitating payment to the electricity.
Well, yeah. Well, this happens when you operate from one of the most remotest part of the world.
Tell us
Yeah.
about that, talking from on at that point. Then we're about to end, and I haven't been able to give you the chance to tell us what exactly you do. And I'll start with Zulfikar, because he says he comes from one of the farthest ends of the world, and that is the second highest peak,
Mountain peak. Yeah.
second highest mountain peak in the world.
Yeah.
It's pretty far away.
And cold.
Tell us what you do. Oh.
Yeah. So yeah. So if I were to talk about, my place, I really like it. I really love this place. And this place, you call it the roof of the world as well. It's among the one of the highest places or most elevated places on the surface of Earth. And we get a lot of tourists from all over the world. Different mountain climbers, different tourists of different days, paragliders, and all that. So we our fascination with tourists started from day one. And the gadgets they usually brought with them from their countries to our homeland was among one of the inspiration that how come they know how to operate all these incredible devices. And how come we do not even know. I mean, that must have been so alien, right? If you were to think about the same situation. So the initial idea started off with that. And then the most brilliant part was the first time when I saw a computer. So I saw a computer like 15 years back, I believe. So there was when my entire interest towards this field actually shifted. So when I saw that there is this thing where you press a button, it appears on the screen. And quite interestingly, you can have a device with it called a mouse as well. I mean, a mouse with electronic device. I mean, wow, must be so incredible, right? So my fascination with that, initially took me, and me and my one of my close friends, we actually started working towards it, and we actually voted for computers, and we actually started talking to the foreigners who actually come in, with their devices in their hands, and they had GPSs along with them mostly. So we actually get to talk to them that how do they operate, and they were like they usually tell us about them. And the fascination for tech, computers, technology started from a very young age. That actually led me to study computer sciences in my bachelor's degree as well. So multiple exchange experiences along the way, crafted me into the person that I'm today. And quite honestly, and it's not only me; it's the people around me. Because I don't know, I never chose this. This chose me, I guess. So I wasn't given an option for that, but the option that I have is the best one, I believe so. And when you are talking about edtech, I believe the entire future of this world is going to be based on this very subject and this very line. So if I want to make a good future in this, I might need to have a very brilliant and a very amazing and inspiring story for many entrepreneurs out there all around the world, so that they can actually relate with. I can if I agree with a story that Brooke can tell or Edmund can tell, if I can actually relate with that on the same level or resonate with that on the same level that they actually want to tell me, right? So for an entrepreneur, the story is pretty same. There are always pain stories that you actually hear about an entrepreneur. But have you ever heard about, an inspirational story that an entrepreneur has, that he was so inspired from this XYZ product that he actually launched his XYZ product and he made XYZ millions in XYZ years, right? You never get to see these stories a lot. And we need to bring this mindset into our entrepreneurs as well. And this needs to be part of our daily or monthly, at least, routine as well, to introduce our entrepreneurs with all these incredible ideas. Make them meet with all these cool people. Meet and make them see world in a very different perspective than they do. So that's that.
Okay. So, what is your life goal? Like, how many people do you want to transform? What's your goal? And when do you say you have finally succeeded?
That's a tough question. And if Brooke would agree with me, if he knows about cricket, that's a Yorker for me. So, um, yeah, I would say that learning is a never-ending process, right? So, if I were to educate the entire world or population on the same curricula that I have currently with me right now, there wouldn't be enough for the next population that I'll be facing in the next couple of years, right? So it would never fade away, or it would never go away. But in terms of entrepreneurship and in terms of on realistic and ground and statistics, I would say that, towards the end of this year, we are planning to expand, into different cities as well. So 10,000 more in the first phase, and then it's gonna spread like COVID. You know, just we are gonna spread from country to country, and then we are coming for you all.
Great. Oh,
Very good.
Edmund, Edmund, tell us about Small Potato, and just like Zulfikar here, it's digital transformation. I'm really amazed about the digital transformation in Malaysia and how it's affecting the small potatoes. Tell us more about that.
So small potato is new. In fact, I think when Brooke, I spoke in your webinar. I don't think small potato existed yet. I'm not sure.
It did.
I think.
Yeah.
Oh, it did. Okay, right when we first started, I guess.
Yeah.
We started in something in April. Yeah, somewhere along those lines. Small potato is very new. And it started because
I'm sorry, one doesn't forget a name like Small Potato.
And every time someone mentions it, I laugh. And I mean, it's very, very new. And it was started only because we lost a lot of contracts when the pandemic started, right? And a lot of businesses suffered, and so did mine. And so when the pandemic started, basically, as we went on lockdown, we went on private lockdown as well, right? Suddenly we had to think of ourselves and what to do and how we're going to survive and how we're going to get through all this. And so after a while, right, me and my wife were like, a month into the lockdowns, and we're like, and we started feeling unhappy. We don't know why, right? And it always starts like that with us, right? We feel unhappy, we don't know why. And so we find an answer. And so it turns out that the source of our unhappiness was that we focused so much on ourselves that we became unhappy, right? And it's like that, right? I mean, imagine staring into a mirror, right? And always looking into a mirror. You're going to be unhappy because there's just so much to complain about. There's so much flaws, too short, too fat, too whatever, right? And so we spent so much time during the pandemic looking at the mirror that we got unhappy. And so when we decided that, hey, look, we can't spend this pandemic thinking about just ourselves. We've got to spend it thinking about other people, right? And if we try our best to solve other people's problems, opportunities come. And so that night itself, when that realization hit, that we have to stop thinking about ourselves. That same night is when we had the idea of a Small Potato. And so Small Potato is really an initiative that brings neighbors together so that neighbors can buy, sell, rent things from one another. So for families who are suffering the pandemic, right, look, they can cook a few extra meals. They can bake bread. If you're a plumber, you can serve your neighbors around you. And so what happens is, you start selling to your neighbors, and neighbors come to support you. And so you keep money within the community circulating within the community, and everyone's better because of it. Not just because people who are suffering are earning money, but also because you build this neighborliness, this community. And if we're going to get out of this pandemic stronger than when we started, it has to be done as a community, as neighbors, as people who care about one another. And so that's what Small Potato is. And yeah, it's still chugging along today.
That's very inspiring, Edmund. I really think also that the hyper local solutions are really, I think it's the right time for hyper local solutions.
Huge opportunity. And I think particularly that's because large organizations, they cannot serve the needs of niches. They can't serve the needs of specific communities. They just can't. But small businesses can. Small businesses can go on the ground and look for very niche areas or very niche people or initiatives to support, and to actually support it and to make good money for themselves and their families, which big corporations can't do.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing what you do, Edmund.
Cheers,
And
man.
Brooke, tell us before we end how UNDP is encouraging more people, and what are the major achievements that the UNDP has made in the last year or two in encouraging more businesses or small businesses and social enterprises in adopting um, better business integrity principles.
Yes. Well, I mean, you asked Zulfikar and Ed about their own companies, but you didn't ask me about my own company because.
Oh yes,
I
start
mean,
with your own company
I have
first.
to say that although I'm
UNDP is not
working with
yours, Brooke?
UNDP now, I am actually a social entrepreneur, and my company is IBLF Global, which is a very small not-for-profit based in the UK, and our mission is to promote responsible business practices through collective action, which takes up the theme that Ed was just talking about, which is the working with communities. And my specialization is getting business and government and civil society to work together on this anti-corruption issue. And I mean, on the premise being that not one of those three participants in society, those sectors in society, can actually do it by themselves. That's what I specialize in, and that's why I've been hired by UNDP to help them with their Fair Biz program. This is the promoting a fair and fair business environment in ASEAN. And I've been working with UNDP for the last year. It's a great program because it actually does what I like doing, which is it focuses both on the business community and on the public policy side. So it tries to find resolutions on both and getting the two sides working together. And I think UNDP's got some really strong attributes, which are that it's present in each of the countries of Southeast Asia, and it's got a regional hub where we can get a lot of exchange of best practices. But still, coming back to the real thing that I think UNDP is beginning to achieve, and it really is only the beginning, but it is not only to educate the new generation of young entrepreneurs and startups about how you can do business with integrity, but it's also to make it to inspire them. It's not just an educational thing. It is inspiration. It is hope. It is a desire to see something different happening in the world than just the same as before. It's thinking outside of the box and introducing these new ideas. And ultimately, I think this could work. It's a little bit like with smoking. You remember smoking used to be very trendy amongst young people, but now it's becoming less and less trendy. In London, you won't see any young people anymore smoking. Not even school kids smoke anymore. In my day in school, we were all smoking a lot, and not just cigarettes. Actually, not me. Actually. But the fact is that if you can make this kind of thing trendy and you can make it real, then I think the sky's the limit, and it is possible to make this into a fundamental change, a grassroots change in society. And if that happens, then those people who are demanding bribes and who are soliciting for some kind of additional favor, they will fall by the wayside.
Thank you, Brooke. It's a very nice way to end our panel. As a moderator, I'm supposed to wrap it up. I don't know I think I'll just do
Good luck, Diane.
I'm just gonna have 5 letters. A B C. I was planning to have everyone write a business integrity alphabet, but I think we won't have enough time. So I said A B C D E. A is what I learned from this panel is attract the right people. B is build your basic principles. C, we talked a lot about conviction. D is I have two words: direction and knowing your true north, as Zulfi Carr had said earlier. And D is develop your own toolkit. And E, E is from Edmund. He talked about this company that had its entire brand all about anti-corruption. So I think A, B, C, D, E, no matter what letter, it really starts with the person, the self, you, me. And then it doesn't work if we all don't do something about it. So thank you very much, you wonderful gentlemen, Brooke, Edmund, and Zulfikar. Thank you for the 1 hour and a half that you spent with us, and I hope some young Filipino entrepreneurs or even some middle-aged Filipino entrepreneurs take inspiration from our panel. I hope you have a good afternoon and
Thanks.
the rest of your day.
Thanks for having us, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Till
you.
next time.
Bye.